Hello and welcome to Broken Entertainment. With indie publishing and indie comics in particular, there's something that's been bugging me, and I hadn't really been able to put my finger on it until just now. Feels like a lot of the people who are doing these, the big indie names, not just the big indie names, there's a lot of them really, seem to be going for an audience that is adult. And not just adult specifically, but has been a fan of comics. And that's great. We need to have things targeted for those people because a lot of them, myself included, have lost faith in comics in the mainstream. And for any number of reasons that we can go into another time. But those people then turn around and, I'll use, Eric July and the Rippaverse as an example, but he's not alone in this. And they'll say, well, American comics are dying. There's this great myth being pushed around by a lot of people in the indie sphere, in comics in particular, and in the culture war sphere, that we are losing Western entertainment. And it's losing to the great and powerful East, I like to call it, because they always refer to the East, Eastern entertainment, Eastern comics, Eastern movies. And it's like, what they actually mean is Japan. First of all, but they won't say Japan for some reason most of the time unless we're talking about anime. And the thing is, I agree that Western comics are struggling. I mean, we have all the information available that they are struggling. I don't believe that the way to... Because they will then turn around. Eric July has said this in the past.
It's awesome. You hear me talk a lot about the parallel economy. So many companies are compromised and there's no going back. We simply need new independent companies to go be great and thrive. We can not only correct the creative issues, but also the economic issues.
He wants to save Western comics, right? And I'm paraphrasing there. They've all said it at some point or another that they want to save Western comics. Or they've said something very similar to that. The problem is that we can't save Western comics by strictly appealing to the people that already like comics. Part of the problem today is that there's no backbench. There's no depth chart, right? In comic fans, there's the number of young readers that are brought into comics is not what it used to be. It's not as high as it used to be, and most of that is because they're inaccessible. They're expensive. A normal traditional indie comic right now is running for, here, let me grab, $4. That's the traditional one. Now you might say, well, that doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're talking about an audience of primarily preteens and early teens that you would be aiming for to grow your base, $4 is a lot. They have a lot of options for entertainment that weren't out there when comics first came out, and to the extent that they are now. Most video games, and I don't mean when comics first came out, it was in the 30s, but when they were really big in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, okay? When most of the generation that I'm talking about being targeted was growing up. Video games weren't in the home, for the most part. You had to go out and play them. Movies weren't as readily accessible as they are now. Forget social media and YouTube. None of that was around. And comics were cheap. And not only were they cheap, but they were everywhere. You could get them at the newspaper stand, you could get them at the grocery store, you could get them at the 7-Eleven. Now they're only in comic book stores, and they're expensive. And that has pushed a lot of people away. On top of that, if you pick up, I've got an issue of Catwoman here. If you pick up an issue of Catwoman, it's not aimed at those people. It's aimed at me. It's fine. I like the comic. It's a decent comic. Rook, great comic, aimed at me. Battle Brick Road, great comic, aimed at me. Cyberfrog, aimed at me. Rainbow the Brute, aimed at people from the 80s, so, me. Rippaverse stuff, aimed, again, at adults. And again, when you get into indies, you want to talk about expensive. You're leaving $4 way down the road, right? But we're targeting people that are already into it, which you need to do. You need to support those customers too, and you want to pull them away from traditional publishing. I get that. But we need to put stuff out there that will grow comics. And that means stuff aimed at kids. You need your kind of Silver Age-esque Superman type stories. You need your Silver Age-esque superheroes. You need superheroes that match what they're seeing in the movies as well. Not in the specific character designs and powers, but in, why was Marvel so popular with kids for so long? Well, great action, interesting characters, and we're talking about the MCU here. And it was funny. Now that formula gets overdone, but that was it. And it worked, and it got a lot of younger people into it that kind of grew up along with the MCU. But none of them went into the comics, because you go to the comics and it's a totally different environment. Because what comics have done is they have grown up with their audience, but in the process left behind the things that would target a younger audience on a consistent basis. Are there younger comics out there? Sure. But are you getting them from DC and Marvel? No, not really. Not very often. Are you getting it from indies? No, not at all. Not that I've seen. I'm sure if somebody has an example of an indie comic on Indiegogo, Kickstarter, wherever, preferably that's ongoing, let me know in the comments. I really want to see it. That's aimed at kids. One of the reasons I got back into buying comics, I wanted something for my kids to get them into reading, and because a lot of studies show that boys are kept into reading by, particularly as they turn 10, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, in that category, they can lose interest in reading, and if you can get them into comics, that keeps them into it. But I can't give Battle Brick Road to a 10-year-old. I can't give Redcoat to a 10-year-old. I can't give Catwoman to a 10-year-old. I could maybe give it to a 13-year-old. I can't give Rook. Okay? Cyberfrog, forget about it. Which is funny because he talks about, Cyberfrog as a character for kids, but then he's got people melting into honey on page. It's kind of a disconnect there. And I think what is needed is people and I'm talking about the reverse here. I'm talking about Ethan Van Sciver. I'm talking about everybody who has ongoing stuff in particular. You need something there. You need a couple things there for people who can give it to their kids, man. You want to support Western comics. You want to quote-unquote save Western comics. You got to have somebody to sell it to when the old people die. Right? One of the things that Star Wars has done very, very well, and I know people will go, what? Star Wars hasn't done anything well since it was sold to Disney. Well, it has a lot of younger fans. The newer stuff, maybe not as much, because it's not been as good, but there's a whole generation of Star Wars fans that grew up on the prequels. And if you didn't have the prequels, you just have people showing Star Wars to their kids, and they'd be, oh, that's neat, and then they'd move on with their life. Then you have the prequels. Now you have a whole generation that grew up in the prequels and the Clone Wars that tied into that. That's something Star Wars has done historically very, very well, is they have had stuff for a new generation every so often, right? This is why Harry Potter continues to be extraordinarily successful, while at the same time not really growing. Look at the average age of Harry Potter fans now. It's maybe easier to get kids into Harry Potter than into Star Wars. But the thing is that we're not making anything for kids, and if you want to get kids into comics, you've got to make something. And this Riververse, just as an example, this is not appropriate for children at all. I'm not saying turn the whole thing into a kids line. Not saying Cyberfrog can't be Cyberfrog, because it's a fun read. Battle Brick Road is incredible. But you gotta have something there. And I think that's what these guys are missing, and I think we as indie creators in general are kind of missing. Now with novels, it's different. So what do we do? Because I don't want to just point out problems. So what do? We need to make stuff that plays to kids. And what that means, kind of the shape that I'm envisioning, you can't do Battle Brick Road for kids, right? So they'd have to come up with something else. But the people that have kind of franchise style stuff, Ghost Machine can probably do it. In fact, they've got some comics coming out. I don't really know, like Hornsby and Halo. I don't know the target audience on that, so that might actually work. But I haven't read it yet, so I don't want to go out on a limb. But there are examples that can work. But these people that have franchises, in particular, are in a position to do something. There's a lot of people who aren't, who are just trying to get their comic out, and that's great. That's perfect. But I'm talking to the people that have said over and over again, we need to save Western comics. Well, if you want to save Western comics, you got to do something about it. And just appealing to the people that already like them isn't enough. So, taking the Rippaverse as an example, make one likable character and tell stories about them that can appeal to that age category. And don't give me anything about, kids these days, I don't want to hear it. If it's good entertainment, they'll go into it. Okay? Every generation's like that. Give me some ISOM stories, or not Horseman, but pick a character. Make some younger stories. Make a younger character if you need to. But the great thing about it is now you get that audience, and then as they get a little bit older, they're looking at Rippaverse and look at all this stuff. Look at all these other characters that they can start reading because they're now age appropriate. Give me, this is Rainbow the Brute, but give me a Cyber Frog that is like the 90s Cyber Frog. For example, give me a version of Cyber Frog that is for kids, because Wrecked Planet is fun, Blood Honey is fun, but it's very murderous, and it's not appropriate, again, for that age range. Now, if you're talking, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds maybe, but you gotta start, again, when did comic fans start? Was about the 12 to 13-year-old age range. I've said 9 and 10 because I think you can reach back there, but there's not a lot for them. And then what you do find out there is a lot of political stuff, and I don't want any of that. These are kids. But you could do a young Cyber Frog and lead into Cyber Frog Wrecked Planet, and you could do a character I think you'd have to make a new one because none of them are likable. Sorry. A likable character in Rippaverse and lead into it. For myself, because I don't want to just call out other people. So I'm going to be published very soon. Agent, my first serial, it's not done, but it's extraordinarily close to done. And then I've got to get covers, and then that's it. Put it out there. And I've got Director that'll follow up, and I've got a Luna Hawk story that will follow up, and I haven't talked about Luna Hawk on here yet, which I will go into. It's a superhero setting, and I'll go into that more in a different video, but I'm going to create some younger stories for Luna Hawk in particular at some point. This isn't an immediate thing for me because I've got a lot of stuff going before that. And what I'd like to do down the road is make a comic of Luna Hawk for kids. Because we all need these newer audiences. We can't just keep selling to the people who have already been buying. I do have this idea and I want to try it. Because to me, one of the things I really want to accomplish with my writing is to get people reading more and to get people having more fun and to not make everything just a wildly inaccessible tome in the genres that I like. I love fantasy. I love sci-fi. I love science fantasy, but there's not a lot of science fantasy. I was thinking about it and I was saying, well, I'm not a YA author or anything like that, and I don't really have designs to be, but at the same time I'm thinking, I can't really be calling people out and not do anything about it. So down the road, I want to make a Luna Hawk comic for that age range, and I think I will probably, I don't know if I can do YA. I just don't, but I'm going to look at it. Because we need to build audiences, not just for comics. We need to build them in general. We need to get men back into reading more. Yes, there's lots of articles floating out about men don't read. Men do read. They read differently. But anyway, what we need to do is stop just complaining about things. We need to stop just saying, well, the Western industry is... Okay, well, do something about it. And I don't just mean do something about it at the audience that is already going to buy your book anyway. Especially you, the big guys. Come on. Do something more than complain that comics are going to be dead and sell them to the same people that have been buying them. And, certainly sell to those people. Please, I want to keep buying them. But we got to grow an audience. You got to grow a fan base outside of that. We have to grow kids into comics because, one, you're going to keep kids reading. That might not otherwise. And two, if you want the industry to be healthy and move forward, there's got to be somebody there. Just my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you liked the video, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing, and I will see you next time.